Ethan Knight was a millionaire. He lost his fiancée to another man, and to avoid showing weakness, he has an audacious plan that will surprise you. He was staring at a wedding invitation from his ex-fiancée, Victoria, to another man before the story begins. Comment below which city you are watching from. Enjoy the story, everyone. A grand mansion stands illuminated under the night sky, its towering glass windows reflecting the city lights. Luxury cars line up outside, their sleek engines humming as chauffeurs step out to open the doors for the elite guests. Paparazzi flash their cameras, eager to capture a glimpse of the most powerful figures in high society. Inside, the grand ballroom shimmers under golden chandeliers. Waiters in crisp black uniforms glide through the crowd, offering glasses of the finest champagne. The air is thick with whispered negotiations. Business deals worth billions unfolding between handshakes and polite smiles. This is not just a party, it is a battlefield of power. Ethan Knight enters, the room seeming to shift around him. Dressed in a sharp black tuxedo, his presence commands attention. He doesn't smile. He doesn't need to. His mere existence radiates control. And tonight, he has one objective: to close the billion-dollar deal that will solidify his empire as untouchable. His investors, powerful men in tailored suits, await him near the grand staircase. As he approaches, a journalist tries to get his attention. "Mr. Knight, just a few words about tonight's event?" Ethan barely glances at him before walking past, his pace unhurried but deliberate. He doesn't entertain the press unless it benefits him. The investors shake his hand as he arrives. "Ethan!" one of them greets with an approving nod. "This is quite the spectacle." "I don't do small," Ethan replies smoothly. "Let's get to business." Before the conversation can go further, a new wave of camera flashes erupts near the entrance. The doors open, revealing someone unexpected. A woman. Dressed in an elegant flowing gown, she steps inside, her heels clicking softly against the polished marble floor. The room falls into a brief hush as people murmur, trying to place her. Sophia Carter. She moves with the kind of grace that suggests she belongs here, though she doesn't. She isn't one of them. She wasn't supposed to matter. And yet, for reasons he can't yet explain, Ethan Knight can't look away. Ethan Knight stood at the edge of the grand ballroom, his gaze surveying the sea of powerful men and women in designer attire. He had built this world, piece by piece, deal by deal. Every handshake, every calculated risk had led him here, to the top of the food chain. Yet, as he took a slow sip of his whiskey, there was no satisfaction, no joy, just the cold realization that power was the only thing he had left. A waiter approached with a tray of expensive champagne. Ethan waved him off. He didn't drink to celebrate, he drank to think. And tonight, he was thinking about the deal that would cement his empire. He turned slightly, his eyes catching his reflection in the towering glass windows that overlooked the city skyline. Feared, respected, untouchable. That was how they saw him. A man who never made mistakes. A man who had everything. But no one knew the truth. No one knew what it was like to be Ethan Knight, the man who had once loved and lost. A flicker of an image surfaced in his mind. Victoria Laurent, the woman who had once stood by his side wearing his ring, whispering promises of forever. The same woman who had walked away from him, choosing his biggest rival, Damian Cole, instead. His grip on the whiskey glass tightened for just a second before he forced himself to relax. Weakness had no place in his life, not anymore. His thoughts were interrupted as a familiar voice greeted him. Lucas, his assistant, stepped beside him, holding a tablet. "Everything is set, sir. The investors are ready for the final discussion." Ethan nodded but didn't move right away. Instead, he glanced toward the entrance of the ballroom again. His jaw clenched slightly as he spotted her, Sophia Carter. She was standing near the grand staircase, looking both out of place and strangely captivating. A woman from a completely different world. A woman who, until now, had meant nothing to him. And yet, something about her presence made the emptiness inside him feel just a little less hollow. The grand ballroom hummed with the murmur of high society conversations, the clinking of crystal glasses, and the occasional laughter from the most powerful people in the city. The evening had gone exactly as Ethan Knight had planned, until now. Then, everything changed. A sudden hush spread across the room as the sound of a microphone being tapped echoed through the speakers. Heads turned, conversations stopped, camera flashes intensified. Sophia Carter stood at the center of the grand stage, gripping the microphone with an unreadable expression. The woman who was supposed to be nothing more than a pretty distraction for the night had just taken control of the room. Ethan's jaw tightened, his fingers curled into fists at his sides. What the hell is she doing? His investors exchanged confused glances. The journalists leaned forward, their cameras ready. Even Victoria Laurent, standing smugly near Damien Cole, raised a curious eyebrow. Then, Sophia spoke. "I know this isn't part of the evening's agenda," she began, her voice smooth but firm. "But there's something I need to say." Ethan took a slow step forward, his heartbeat unnervingly steady. The way she was standing, the way her fingers trembled ever so slightly against the microphone, it wasn't just confidence. It was something else. A warning. Sophia took a deep breath and let her gaze travel across the sea of powerful guests before landing directly on Ethan. "I'm not just Ethan's date for the evening." She paused, letting the tension thicken. The entire ballroom was frozen in anticipation, waiting for her next words. Then she dropped the bombshell. "I'm carrying his child." Gasps erupted. A deafening silence followed, stretching long enough for Ethan to feel the weight of the entire world crashing down on him. The flashing of cameras became relentless. Voices overlapped in chaotic whispers, some shocked, some amused, some already turning the revelation into tomorrow's headlines. Ethan's expression didn't change. Not yet. Not here. But inside, something sharp twisted in his chest. His investors' expressions turned to uncertainty. Victoria exchanged a delighted smirk with Damien, and Sophia. Sophia stood under the spotlight, her breathing steady, but her eyes filled with something unspoken. Ethan took another slow step forward. His voice, low and lethal, cut through the chaos. "What did you just say?" The sound of ice clinking against glass echoed through the dimly lit penthouse as Ethan Knight stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring at the city below. The skyline stretched infinitely, but tonight, it felt suffocating. The whiskey in his hand barely numbed the bitterness curling in his chest. Victoria Laurent's words still rang in his ears, like an open wound that refused to close. "You don't love anyone, Ethan. You don't even know how." She had said it with a smile, with no hesitation, as if she had rehearsed it, as if their years together had meant nothing. And then she had walked away, right into the arms of Damien Cole, his biggest rival, his enemy. The media had turned the scandal into a circus. Victoria Laurent leaves billionaire fiancé for his competitor. The headlines had been relentless, portraying Ethan as the cold, heartless businessman incapable of love. His investors had started whispering. His board had started questioning. A man like Ethan didn't just lose. He didn't get humiliated. And yet, Victoria had made sure the world saw him bleed. Lucas, his assistant, entered the room, his footsteps careful, as if stepping too close to a wounded predator. "They're reconsidering the deal," Lucas said, placing a tablet on the sleek black desk. "The investors are worried about your public image. They think your personal life is unstable." Ethan turned, his expression unreadable. "Since when do investors care about my personal life?" Lucas hesitated. "They want to see stability. A controlled personal life means a controlled empire. They need reassurance." Ethan exhaled sharply, setting his glass down with a controlled motion. Of course, this wasn't about love. It was about control. He had spent his life ensuring nothing was out of his grasp, and now, one woman had managed to make the world see him as weak. He wouldn't let that happen. He picked up the tablet, scrolling through the reports. His mind was already moving 3 steps ahead. If they wanted stability, he would give them stability. His gaze flickered toward Lucas. "Find me someone." Lucas blinked. Someone? A woman. Someone who looks the part, plays the role, and disappears when I no longer need her. Lucas adjusted his tie, uncertain. "Sir, are you saying—" Ethan's voice was calm, calculated. "I need a girlfriend, Lucas, and I need one by next week." A dimly lit diner buzzed with the sound of clinking plates, murmured conversations, and the distant hum of a jukebox playing an old tune. The night shift was dragging, and for Sophia Carter, it felt endless. She moved swiftly between tables, balancing a tray of coffee cups in one hand and a notepad in the other. Stray strands of her dark hair fell loose from her ponytail, but she had no time to fix them. The bills stacked on her counter at home didn't care if she was exhausted. "Table 5 is complaining again," her co-worker Jenna muttered as she passed by. Sophia forced a polite smile and approached the grumpy businessman at table 5. "Is everything okay, sir?" He barely looked at her. "This coffee's cold, and I asked for no sugar." She resisted the urge to roll her eyes and nodded instead. "I'll fix that for you." This wasn't the life she had imagined. Once upon a time, she had dreamed of becoming a writer, crafting stories that would captivate the world. But reality had a cruel way of interfering. With rent due, her younger brother's tuition fees looming, and her student loans suffocating her, dreams had been replaced by survival. The bell above the diner's entrance jingled. Another customer. But this one wasn't like the others. A tall man in a sharp black suit stepped inside, his presence instantly shifting the atmosphere. He didn't belong in a place like this. The luxury of his watch alone could have paid for an entire month's rent. He scanned the diner with sharp eyes before settling his gaze on her. Sophia frowned. "Can I help you?" The man, Lucas, though she didn't know his name yet, walked toward her, placing a crisp business card on the counter. "My employer would like to speak with you." Sophia stared at the card. "Knight Enterprises." She scoffed. "I think you have the wrong person." Lucas didn't blink. "He believes you're exactly the right person." Sophia hesitated. She had heard of Ethan Knight, of course. Who hadn't? The ruthless billionaire who dominated every business headline. But why would someone like him be interested in her? "Listen, I don't have time for whatever this is," she said, tossing the card back. Lucas caught it midair and placed it back in front of her. "If you change your mind, meet me at this address tomorrow at noon." With that, he turned and walked out, leaving Sophia staring after him, confusion swirling in her mind. She should have ignored it. She should have walked away. But desperation had a funny way of making people consider the impossible. Sophia sat at the edge of her tiny apartment's worn-out couch, the crisp business card still resting on her coffee table. The words Knight Enterprises stared back at her, daring her to make a choice. She had spent the night tossing and turning, debating whether to ignore the offer or entertain whatever ridiculous proposition Ethan Knight had in mind. Every logical part of her screamed, "Stay away." Rich men like him didn't offer opportunities without expecting something in return. But then, there were the overdue bills stacked on her counter, the landlord's warning from last week, the tuition fees her younger brother needed. She exhaled sharply and grabbed her coat. The sleek office building towered over the city skyline, intimidating and pristine. Sophia hesitated for a moment before stepping inside, feeling completely out of place among the polished floors and expensive suits. Lucas was waiting for her near the elevator. Without a word, he led her through a set of glass doors into an office that was larger than her entire apartment. Ethan Knight stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, his back to her, hands in his pockets. When he finally turned, his piercing gaze locked onto hers, assessing her like she was just another business deal. "You came." His voice was calm, unreadable. Sophia crossed her arms. "I'm not saying yes. I just want to hear what this is about." Ethan smirked, walking toward his desk. "Straight to the point." "Good." He gestured toward a chair. "Sit." She didn't. "I'll stand." His eyes flickered with amusement before he leaned against his desk. "Fine. I need a date for a high-profile event tomorrow night." Sophia frowned. "That's it? You dragged me all the way here for that?" Ethan tilted his head slightly. "Not just any date. I need someone convincing, someone the media will believe, and someone who won't get attached." Sophia scoffed. "You want me to play your fake girlfriend?" "Yes." She shook her head. "Not interested." Ethan didn't blink. "I'll pay you $10,000. Her breath hitched, but she quickly masked her reaction. That was more money than she had seen in years. Still, she forced herself to hold her ground. "I don't sell myself." His smirk faded, replaced by something more serious. "It's not that kind of arrangement. You attend one night, play the role, and leave with a check. No strings attached." Sophia hesitated. This was insane. Completely insane. But then her mind flashed back to the landlord's warnings, the stack of unpaid bills, the empty fridge in her kitchen. Ethan watched her closely, sensing the battle in her mind. Then, he dealt the final blow. "I'll double it." $20,000. Enough to pay rent for months. Enough to cover her brother's tuition. Enough to breathe. She swallowed hard, the weight of desperation crushing any last ounce of pride. "Fine," she muttered. "One night, that's it." Ethan extended his hand. "One night." She shook it, feeling the undeniable shift in her world. The reflection staring back at Sophia Carter in the grand mirror was unrecognizable. A fitted designer gown, a shade of deep emerald green, hugged her curves perfectly. The silk fabric shimmered under the soft, golden lighting of the private dressing room. Her hair, once tied up in a messy ponytail from long shifts at the diner, now cascaded in soft waves down her shoulders. The smoky eyeshadow, the bold red lips, everything about her screamed elegance. Yet deep down, she still felt like an outsider. Lucas, standing near the door, gave an approving nod. "You clean up well." Sophia scoffed, shifting uncomfortably in the heels that felt like torture devices. I feel like I'm wearing someone else's life. Lucas smirked. For one night, you are. The doors to the Grand Night Mansion opened, and a black luxury car pulled up in the circular driveway. The moment Sophia stepped out, a ripple of whispers spread through the crowd of elite guests gathered near the entrance. Their curiosity was instant. Who is she? I've never seen her before. She must be important if she's on Ethan Knight's arm. Ethan stood at the top of the grand staircase, his tuxedo perfectly tailored, his presence commanding. He watched as Sophia walked toward him, every step slow and calculated, her confidence building with each movement. The dress, the makeup, the diamonds glistening on her wrist. She looked the part, and for a brief moment, he was almost convinced. When she reached him, he leaned in slightly, his voice low but firm. Remember the rules. Stick to the plan. Sophia arched a perfectly sculpted brow. Relax, Knight. I won't embarrass you. With a controlled smirk, he offered his arm, and she slipped her hand through, allowing him to lead her into the grand ballroom. The murmurs followed them, the guests stealing curious glances, and just like that, Sophia Carter, waitress and struggling writer, had officially stepped into the world of the elite. But what neither of them realized yet was that this night wouldn't go according to plan. The grand ballroom shimmered under the golden glow of chandeliers, casting an air of opulence over the crowd. The scent of expensive champagne and rare perfumes mingled in the air, blending with the hushed conversations of the elite. Sophia Carter had been in the room for barely 10 minutes, yet she could feel the weight of every gaze on her. Ethan Knight led her through the sea of billionaires and socialites, his posture rigid, his expression unreadable. To them, he was a king in his castle. To her, he was just another man who thought the world belonged to him. They stopped near a small group of investors. Ethan let go of her arm, seamlessly slipping into business mode. His voice turned sharp, controlled. Gentlemen, I assume you're enjoying the evening? The men chuckled, one of them raising his glass. Quite the spectacle, Knight. Though I must say, your choice of company is intriguing. Sophia didn't miss the condescension in his tone. She felt Ethan tense slightly beside her but say nothing. His silence irritated her. She tilted her head, her voice laced with amusement. I'd say the same about you, but I wouldn't want to embarrass you in front of your friends. A brief, stunned silence followed. Then the investor let out a surprised chuckle, clearly not expecting a response. Ethan glanced at her, something unreadable flickering in his cold blue eyes. Most women in this room tiptoed around power. She, on the other hand, had just stepped on its toes. As the investors shifted the conversation, Sophia leaned toward Ethan, lowering her voice. You just let them talk down to you? His jaw tightened. I don't waste my breath on people who don't matter. She smirked. That's funny, because from where I'm standing, it looks like they're the ones running the show. Ethan turned his head, locking eyes with her. There was something different in his gaze now, curiosity mixed with irritation. Careful, Sophia. You're here to play a role, not challenge me. She shrugged. Maybe I don't like playing by your rules. His lips curved into the faintest smirk. Then you're in the wrong place. They stared at each other for a long moment, an invisible battle of wills. She should have felt intimidated, but instead, a thrill ran through her veins. Maybe this wouldn't be as boring as she thought. The ballroom hummed with conversations, laughter, and the occasional clinking of champagne glasses. The elite of the business world thrived on power plays disguised as small talk, each conversation a silent battle for dominance. Then, the air changed, a shift so subtle yet undeniable. The doors to the grand ballroom opened once more, and for a brief moment, time seemed to slow. The crowd near the entrance parted instinctively, whispers rippling through the room like a quiet storm rolling in. Victoria Laurent had arrived. Draped in a blood-red silk gown, she walked with the confidence of a woman who had once owned the room, and perhaps still believed she did. Beside her, Damien Cole, Ethan's most bitter rival, exuded the kind of arrogance only a man who had stolen something valuable could possess. Sophia didn't need to be told who they were. She recognized them from the tabloids, from the way Ethan's body stiffened beside her. Victoria's gaze found Ethan almost immediately. A slow, knowing smirk curled her lips as if she had been expecting this moment. Damien leaned in, whispering something to her that made her laugh softly. It was a calculated move, a performance meant for Ethan to see. Sophia felt Ethan's grip on his whiskey glass tighten. If she hadn't been standing so close, she might have missed the way his jaw clenched, the brief flicker of something dark in his usually emotionless eyes. Victoria's heels clicked against the marble floor as she walked toward them, her smile radiant, her every step laced with quiet malice. "Ethan," she purred, her voice honey-sweet but sharp underneath. What a surprise. Ethan's expression didn't waver. "Victoria." She tilted her head slightly, her gaze sliding to Sophia. "And who is this?" Sophia met her eyes without hesitation, refusing to shrink under the weight of her scrutiny. "Sophia Carter," she said smoothly. "Ethan's girlfriend." Victoria's smile didn't falter, but something flickered in her gaze. Amusement? Annoyance? It was hard to tell. "How interesting," Victoria mused. "You move on so quickly, Ethan. I suppose loneliness doesn't suit you." Damien chuckled beside her, taking a sip of his drink. Or maybe he just needed someone to fill the void you left. The words were a challenge, bait laid out carefully. Ethan didn't react, but Sophia could feel the storm brewing beneath his calm exterior. And for some reason, she didn't want him to face it alone. She smiled at Victoria, a picture of effortless confidence. "Oh, it's nothing like that. Ethan just has good taste. Though judging by your choice, I can't say the same for you." Damien smirked, entertained. Victoria's eyes flashed with something far less pleasant. The game had begun, and Victoria Laurent never played fair. The ballroom's golden glow shimmered off the champagne glasses as the night wore on. But for Ethan Knight, the world had narrowed down to a single, infuriating sight. Damien Cole was standing too close to Sophia. Ethan watched as Damien leaned in slightly, his signature smirk in place, whispering something that made Sophia chuckle softly. Her eyes held amusement, but Ethan knew better. Damien never did anything without an ulterior motive. Victoria, standing nearby, watched the exchange with a knowing smile, enjoying the silent battle unfolding in front of her. Ethan took a slow sip of his whiskey, but his grip on the glass tightened. He wasn't the type to show emotion, especially not over something or someone that wasn't supposed to matter. But as he saw Damien's hand brush lightly against Sophia's arm, something primal and possessive flickered in his chest. Sophia, ever perceptive, caught Ethan's gaze from across the room. She arched a brow, as if daring him to react. "Your new girlfriend is quite refreshing," Damien mused, his tone laced with mock admiration. "Not your usual type, but I can see the appeal." Sophia tilted her head, playing along. And what exactly is my appeal, Mr. Cole? Damien grinned. Oh, where do I begin? Fiery, unpredictable, and from what I can tell, not easily impressed. Ethan had heard enough. Setting his glass down with calculated precision, he crossed the room in long, controlled strides. The space between them evaporated in seconds as he placed a firm hand on the small of Sophia's back, his presence suddenly engulfing her. His voice was smooth but edged with warning. I see you've met Damien. Sophia didn't flinch at his sudden proximity. In fact, she seemed amused. Yes, he's been very entertaining. Damien chuckled, unfazed by the storm brewing behind Ethan's eyes. Just appreciating the finer things in life, Knight. You always did have good taste. Ethan's jaw tensed. His eyes flicked between Damien's smug expression and Sophia's playful defiance. He didn't like this game. Not one bit. With deliberate ease, he pulled Sophia closer, his fingers pressing just slightly against her waist, a silent declaration of ownership. I don't recall needing your approval. Sophia smirked, enjoying the tension radiating from both men. Relax, Ethan, she murmured, just loud enough for him to hear. You're acting like you care. His gaze locked onto hers, dark and unreadable. You're here with me, Sophia. Don't forget that. Damien lifted his glass in mock cheers. Ah, possessiveness. How unlike you, Knight. Ethan's voice dropped an octave, lethal in its calmness. Stay in your lane, Cole. Damien merely chuckled, clearly entertained, but he didn't push further. Not yet. As he walked away, Victoria joined him, whispering something into his ear that made him smirk wider. The night was far from over. Sophia, meanwhile, turned to Ethan with an amused glint in her eye. You're cute when you're jealous. Ethan didn't smile. I don't get jealous. She chuckled. Sure, Knight. Whatever helps you sleep at night. The music in the grand ballroom shifted, the tempo slowing to a sensual, haunting melody. The dance floor, once filled with idle chatter and scattered movement, now became the center of attention as couples paired up for the evening's most anticipated waltz. Sophia barely had a moment to breathe before Ethan's hand was at her waist, his grip firm but not forceful. His other hand extended toward hers, wordlessly demanding her attention. Dance with me, he said, his voice low. It wasn't a question. Sophia hesitated, her eyes flickering toward the crowd. Victoria and Damien were watching. The investors were watching. The entire ballroom seemed to be waiting. Is this part of the act? She whispered, her fingers brushing against his as she reluctantly placed her hand in his. Ethan pulled her in, their bodies aligning as he led her onto the polished marble floor. Just follow my lead. The moment his hand settled on her lower back, a strange heat surged through her. He moved effortlessly, guiding her with precision, every step smooth and deliberate. She was expecting stiffness, calculation, but instead, he was fluid, powerful. And for the first time that night, she wasn't sure where the performance ended and reality began. You dance? She murmured, surprised. His lips barely curved into something resembling amusement. I've attended my fair share of these events. She smirked. So you do have a soul. He spun her, their bodies separating briefly before he pulled her back in. She hadn't expected to feel breathless, hadn't expected her pulse to race with every subtle touch, every brush of fabric against fabric. I wouldn't go that far, he murmured, his gaze locked onto hers. The energy between them shifted. The crowd faded. The voices, the whispers, the judgment, it all melted away. It was just the two of them now, moving in perfect harmony. Sophia's fingers instinctively curled around his shoulder. "You're staring, Knight." He didn't look away. "So are you." She exhaled sharply, trying to regain control of her thoughts, but it was impossible. The way he held her, the way he moved with such restrained intensity, it was intoxicating. Across the ballroom, Victoria watched with narrowed eyes, her grip tightening around her champagne flute. Damien smirked beside her, clearly entertained. "They look good together," Damien mused, tilting his glass toward the dance floor. Victoria scoffed. "She's temporary." "Are you sure about that?" Victoria didn't answer. Back on the dance floor, the song was coming to an end, but neither Ethan nor Sophia pulled away immediately. For a moment they stood there, breathing in the same air, trapped in a moment neither of them fully understood. Sophia swallowed hard. "I think I hate you a little less right now." Ethan's fingers grazed against her wrist before finally releasing her. "That's progress." The applause from the crowd broke the spell, and just like that, the moment was gone. The dance had ended, but the fire lingering in Sophia's veins hadn't. She could still feel Ethan's touch, the weight of his gaze, the way their bodies had moved, as if they had done it 100 times before. She barely had a moment to gather her thoughts before a soft, clipped voice cut through the murmuring crowd. "Enjoying your fairy tale, darling?" Sophia turned, already knowing who she would find. Victoria Laurent stood poised, a delicate yet deadly smile curving her red lips. Her champagne glass rested lightly between her fingers, but her eyes, those sharp, calculating eyes, held nothing but ice. Sophia lifted her chin, refusing to be intimidated. "If this is a fairy tale, then you must be the evil queen, be the—" Victoria chuckled, a smooth, practiced sound. "How charming. But we both know this isn't a fairy tale, Sophia. It's a transaction, a temporary illusion." She took a slow sip of champagne before lowering her voice. "You're playing a very dangerous game." Sophia's pulse kicked up a notch, but she didn't let it show. "I'm not playing anything." Victoria leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. "Oh, but you are. And here's what you don't understand. This isn't just about Ethan. It never was. You're standing in a world that doesn't belong to you, wearing a dress you could never afford, pretending to be something you're not. And I know exactly how to make sure everyone sees the truth." Sophia clenched her jaw. "You don't scare me." Victoria smirked, reaching into the small clutch at her side. She pulled out her phone and turned the screen toward Sophia. A photo, blurry but clear enough. Sophia's younger brother sitting outside his college library, completely unaware he was being watched. Sophia's breath caught in her throat. Victoria's voice remained calm, almost pleasant. "Such a promising future he has. Would be a shame if something complicated his education, don't you think?" Sophia's stomach twisted, her nails digging into her palm. "What do you want?" Victoria stepped back, her expression victorious. "Simple. When the time comes, you will do exactly as I say. No questions, no hesitation. Otherwise—" She let the implication linger, tapping the phone screen before tucking it back into her clutch. "I knew you'd be smart enough to understand." Sophia forced herself to breathe, to stay composed, even as her world tilted under her feet. Victoria smiled sweetly, giving Sophia one last once-over. "Enjoy the rest of your evening." With that, she turned and disappeared back into the crowd, leaving Sophia standing there, her heart pounding, her mind spinning. She had just stepped into a game she never intended to play, and losing wasn't an option. The ballroom buzzed with life, but for Sophia, the air had turned suffocating. Victoria's words echoed in her mind, repeating like a cruel melody. When the time comes, you will do exactly as I say. No questions, no hesitation. Her fingers trembled as she gripped the edge of a champagne flute she had no intention of drinking. Across the room, Ethan stood near a group of high-profile investors, his expression sharp, controlled, completely unaware of the storm raging inside her. She wanted to hate him. She wanted to believe he was just another arrogant billionaire who deserved whatever Victoria was planning. But the memory of their dance, of the way he had looked at her like she was more than just a temporary arrangement, refused to leave her mind. Her eyes flickered to her phone. The picture Victoria had shown her, the proof that her younger brother was being watched, burned in her thoughts. If she disobeyed, if she defied Victoria, what would happen to him? Betray him? Save your brother? The choice should have been simple, but it wasn't. A familiar presence came beside her. Ethan. You look like you're plotting something, he murmured, his voice low, unreadable. She forced a smirk. And if I am? He studied her for a long moment. Then I'd say you're not very good at hiding it. Her heart pounded. Could he see through her? Could he sense the war raging inside her? He reached for her hand, not for show, not for the performance, but something almost real. His warmth seeped through her skin, grounding her for just a second. Whatever it is, he said, his tone softer than she expected. You don't have to handle it alone. Sophia swallowed hard. He didn't know how wrong he was, because in the end, she would have to choose. And either way, someone was going to get hurt. The grand ballroom was alive with murmurs and laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the quiet hum of a live orchestra. But as Sophia stepped forward, the weight of 100 eyes fell on her. She barely felt her own legs move as she reached the center of the room, gripping the microphone tighter than she should. The chandelier lights above her suddenly felt blinding, the heat of expectation suffocating. Across the room, Ethan's relaxed posture shifted, his sharp gaze locked onto her, confusion flickering in his eyes. He hadn't planned this. This wasn't part of the deal. Sophia swallowed the lump in her throat. Victoria stood at the far end of the room, swirling a glass of champagne, her expression expectant, a silent warning. Sophia took a deep breath. Do it. Say it. Get it over with. She forced herself to smile, though her heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst. I have an announcement to make. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled against the microphone. The whispers among the elite crowd quieted, replaced by an eerie silence. Ethan took a step forward, his entire body coiled with tension. What the hell is she doing? I'm not just Ethan Knight's date, Sophia continued, forcing the words out before she lost her nerve. Her gaze found his, locking onto his piercing blue eyes. I'm carrying his child. Gasps erupted across the room. The air cracked with electricity as reporters scrambled to grab their cameras, flashes exploding in rapid succession. The investors, those who had come to assess Ethan's stability, exchanged stunned glances, murmuring in disbelief. Ethan felt the ground shift beneath him. His world, his carefully calculated, meticulously built empire, was imploding. His jaw clenched, his fingers curled into fists at his sides. Sophia. His voice was low, dangerous. What the hell are you talking about? She couldn't breathe. She couldn't look away, but she didn't have an answer. Victoria's smirk deepened from across the room. Checkmate. Ethan stepped closer, closing the space between them. His voice was quiet, meant only for her. Tell me this is a lie. Sophia swallowed hard. If she told the truth, her brother would suffer. If she lied, she would lose everything. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Because no matter which way she turned, she had already lost. The ballroom, once a stage of elegance and whispered business deals, had erupted into pure chaos. Camera flashes exploded in rapid succession, reporters scrambling over one another, voices rising in a cacophony of shock and speculation. Ethan, is it true? When did you find out about the pregnancy? Is this the reason for your sudden relationship? Ethan Knight barely heard them. His pulse roared in his ears, his body rigid with an emotion he hadn't felt in years. Betrayal. He stared at Sophia, his entire world tilting on its axis. This wasn't just a lie. This was a calculated attack. He took a slow step toward her, his voice dangerously low, meant only for her ears. Tell me the truth, right now. Sophia opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Because what could she say? That she was forced into this? That her brother was being used as leverage? That Victoria had trapped her in a game she didn't know how to win? Before she could find the words, Victoria's voice cut through the storm, smooth and filled with false sympathy. Oh, Ethan, surely you're not surprised. I mean, you two have been so close lately. Ethan's head snapped toward her, rage flashing in his icy blue eyes. You did this. Victoria simply raised a brow, sipping from her champagne flute like she was watching a theatrical performance unfold exactly as she had planned. Don't look at me, darling. Your girlfriend is the one who made the announcement. Ethan turned back to Sophia, his breath controlled, his movements careful, too careful. The way a man moves before he destroys everything in his path. Is this what you wanted? His voice was barely above a whisper, but every syllable dripped with restrained fury. To humiliate me? To use my name for your own benefit? Sophia's heart pounded. Ethan, no. His tone was final, lethal. I trusted you. That was the worst part, wasn't it? He had trusted her in his own cold, detached way. She had been different, or so he had thought. The crowd around them kept watching, the hungry eyes of the elite waiting to see how the great Ethan Knight would handle this humiliation. But he wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Without another word, Ethan turned on his heel and walked away, shoving past the sea of cameras and guests. His departure was controlled, but Sophia knew better. He was furious. He was done, and she had just lost him forever. The next morning, the world was on fire. News anchors, online tabloids, and social media platforms were flooded with a single name, Ethan Knight. Screens flashed with headlines, Billionaire Ethan Knight's secret love affair exposed. Ethan Knight to become a father? Mystery woman shocks high society gala. Fake girlfriend or real scandal? The truth behind Sophia Carter's bombshell confession. Sophia sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the screen of her phone, her notifications overflowing. Texts, missed calls, emails from numbers she didn't recognize. The world had turned her into the most talked-about woman overnight, and not in a good way. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the social media storm. Some comments were mocking, some vicious. Gold digger alert! She trapped a billionaire! No way Knight is the father. This woman looks like she came from nothing. Can't believe Ethan fell for this scam. Pathetic. Her stomach twisted. It didn't matter that the pregnancy was a lie. It didn't matter that she had been forced into this by Victoria. The world had already made up its mind about her. A loud knock on her apartment door snapped her back to reality. She hesitated before walking to the door, every nerve in her body on edge. The moment she opened it, a blinding flash nearly knocked her back. Paparazzi. A flood of cameras, microphones shoved in her face, reporters shouting over each other. Sophia, is Ethan really the father? Did you lie to trap him? How long have you two been together? She slammed the door shut, pressing her back against it, her breathing ragged. This wasn't just a headline anymore. This was a nightmare. Meanwhile, in a penthouse far above the chaos, Ethan stood in front of his floor-to-ceiling windows, staring at the skyline, his jaw clenched so tightly it ached. His phone buzzed on his desk, but he didn't pick it up. Lucas stood beside him, scrolling through the news reports. It's everywhere. Every major outlet is covering it. Investors are nervous. Some are pulling back. Ethan exhaled sharply. Of course they are. He had spent years crafting an image of control, power, and precision. Now, in a single night, it was being torn apart. Lucas hesitated before speaking. What do you want to do? Ethan's hands curled into fists. Fix this. His voice was cold, emotionless. I don't care how. Just fix it. Lucas nodded and left the room. Ethan remained still, his thoughts dark. This wasn't just an attack on his name. This was war. Ethan Knight's penthouse was silent, but the air inside crackled with fury. He stood near his desk, gripping the edge so tightly his knuckles turned white. The headlines, the whispers, the humiliation, all of it spiraled inside him, a storm barely contained beneath his cold, ruthless exterior. Lucas hesitated before speaking. She's been avoiding the press. No official statement from her yet. Ethan let out a sharp laugh, one devoid of humor. Avoiding the press? He turned, eyes dark with rage. She didn't avoid them when she grabbed that damn mic, did she? Lucas didn't answer. There was nothing to say. The world had seen what happened. Ethan Knight, the man who never lost, had been blindsided in front of the entire high society elite, and it had been because of her. Ethan grabbed his phone, dialing Sophia's number. It rang and rang and rang. No answer. He clenched his jaw, his patience shattering. Fine. If she wouldn't come to him, he'd go to her. Sophia's apartment. A loud, urgent knock pounded against Sophia's door. She froze, her heart slamming against her ribs. She knew who it was, she wasn't ready. Another knock, harder this time. Sophia, open the damn door. Her hands trembled as she reached for the handle. She barely had time to register Ethan's presence before he stormed inside, his towering frame radiating fury. What the hell did you do? His voice was low, but lethal. Sophia swallowed hard. Ethan, don't. His eyes burned with betrayal. Don't lie to me. You think this is some kind of game? You wanted money? You wanted fame? He took a slow step closer, his presence suffocating. Congratulations, Sophia. You got it. Sophia's chest tightened. It's not like that. Ethan let out a sharp exhale, shaking his head. Then explain it to me, he bit out. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you used me. You knew exactly what you were doing. Her throat tightened. She could tell him the truth. She could beg him to believe her. But Victoria's threat echoed in her head. She couldn't risk it. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Instead, she forced herself to meet his glare. Believe what you want, Ethan. His jaw ticked, his hands curling into fists. He had trusted her, let his guard down, if only a little. And now, he had been made a fool of. Don't ever come near me again, he said coldly. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him. Sophia stood there, staring at the door, her heart breaking, because she had just lost the only person who could have saved her. The echoes of clicking cameras and murmuring voices faded into a low hum as Ethan stepped out of Sophia's apartment building. The cold night air did nothing to cool the fire burning beneath his skin. His reputation, his carefully built empire, had been shaken, and it was all because of her. Paparazzi had already gathered outside, their cameras flashing like a relentless storm. "Mr. Knight, is it true you're going to be a father? Are you planning to marry Miss Carter? Did she trap you into this relationship?" Ethan clenched his jaw, ignoring them as he climbed into his sleek black car. The moment the door shut behind him, silence engulfed him, except for the sound of his own heartbeat, hammering against his ribs. Lucas sat in the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel tightly. "This isn't going away, Ethan." Ethan exhaled sharply, his fingers running through his hair in frustration. "I don't care about the press. I care about the fact that I was played." Lucas hesitated before speaking. "Do you really think she did this for money?" Ethan turned his head sharply. "Don't!" His voice was steel. "Don't defend her!" Lucas shut his mouth, understanding the unspoken rule. Ethan Knight did not tolerate betrayal. The car pulled away from the curb, leaving behind the chaos, the headlines, the flashing lights. But none of it compared to the storm inside him. The next morning, Knight Enterprises. Ethan strode into his office, his presence enough to make his employees stiffen in their seats. His assistant, Emma, approached cautiously, a tablet in her hands. "Sir, the board has requested an emergency meeting." "Of course they have," Ethan muttered. He loosened his tie, his patience razor thin. He entered the boardroom, where his top investors and executives were already seated. The tension in the room was palpable. Ethan, one of the older investors, spoke first, his tone careful. "We need to discuss the situation." Ethan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "Which situation? The fact that I've been dragged into a public scandal? Or the fact that everyone in this room thinks it affects my ability to run this company?" Another investor cleared his throat. "The media perception isn't ideal. Investors don't like unpredictability. If there's truth to this pregnancy, it raises concerns." Ethan's grip on the table tightened. "My personal life is not up for discussion. It is when it impacts the company." Silence stretched. Ethan's gaze turned icy. "If any of you want out, there's the door. I don't beg. I don't explain myself." No one moved. Good. The meeting continued, but Ethan wasn't really listening. His mind was elsewhere, on a woman with defiance in her eyes and a secret she refused to share. He had walked away from her last night, but why did it still feel like she was haunting him? The sun barely peeked through the gray clouds as Sophia Carter sat at her tiny kitchen table, staring blankly at the eviction notice clutched in her trembling hands. The ink on the paper seemed to blur as the weight of the last 24 hours settled over her like an unshakable fog. Her phone, face down on the table, buzzed endlessly with calls she refused to answer. The media, journalists, former friends, everyone wanted a statement. Everyone wanted a scandal. She was no longer just a struggling waitress. She was the woman who trapped Ethan Knight. The consequences had been swift and merciless. Sophia's workplace, earlier that morning. She had walked into the diner as she had every morning for the last 3 years, hoping, praying, that maybe, just maybe, life could return to normal. That she could hide behind the counter, take orders, and pretend the world wasn't tearing her apart outside these 4 walls. Instead, she barely made it past the front door before her manager, Greg, intercepted her. his expression tight. "Sophia," he started, his voice unusually formal, "we need to talk." A sinking feeling twisted in her gut. "Look, I don't know how else to say this, but..." He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "We can't have this kind of attention here. Customers are asking questions. The press has been calling. It's bad for business." Sophia's breath caught. "You're firing me?" Greg wouldn't meet her eyes. "It's nothing personal. Nothing personal." Right. She had given years to this place, covered shifts when no one else would. But one rumor, one lie, and suddenly she was disposable. She took a shaky breath. "Right. I get it." Greg hesitated. "For what it's worth, I hope things get better for you." Sophia bit back the bitter laugh, threatening to escape. Things weren't going to get better. They were about to get worse. Fade in. Sophia's apartment. Back to present. The knock on her door was sharp, unrelenting. She already knew who it was. Her landlord, Mr. Olson, stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "Your rent was due last week, Sophia." "I just need more time," she whispered, gripping the doorframe. He sighed, shaking his head. "I've been patient, but with everything going on, I have other tenants who can pay. Please." The word tasted like defeat. He hesitated for only a second before his expression hardened. "I'm sorry. You have 3 days to vacate." The door closed, and Sophia stood there, numb. No job, no home, no way out. She sank to the floor, pressing her forehead against her knees as silent tears spilled over. She had never felt so utterly, completely alone. A sleek black car pulled up in front of the towering glass headquarters of Knight Enterprises. Ethan Knight stepped out, his presence commanding as he walked through the lobby, his jaw clenched, his mind set on one thing: damage control. His world had been shaken, his reputation dragged through the mud, and there was only one person responsible. Sophia Carter, Knight Enterprises Executive Office. Lucas stood across from Ethan's desk, an iPad in hand, watching his boss carefully. "It's already started," he said cautiously. "Job applications denied, credit accounts frozen. She won't get hired anywhere in the city." Ethan's expression remained cold. "Good." Lucas hesitated. "Ethan, are you sure about this?" Ethan leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping against the desk. "She humiliated me in front of every investor I worked years to gain. She made a fool of me, and now she's facing the consequences." Lucas exhaled, shaking his head slightly. "What if she didn't do it for the reasons you think?" Ethan's gaze snapped to him, ice cold. "There's no other explanation. She saw an opportunity and took it." Silence stretched between them before Lucas nodded, turning to leave. But before he stepped out, he muttered, "Just don't let revenge blind you from the truth." The door closed, leaving Ethan alone in his office, the city skyline stretching endlessly before him. He should feel satisfied, but he didn't. Sophia's apartment, night. Sophia sat on the floor of her now nearly empty apartment, the eviction notice beside her, her fingers gripping her phone tightly. Call after call, every job she applied for turned her down. She wasn't stupid. She knew who was behind it. Ethan Knight was making sure she never recovered from this. Her vision blurred, her breath shallow as the weight of it all crushed her. The walls felt like they were closing in. She had nothing, no job, no money, no way out. And the worst part, she still couldn't hate him, because she knew the man behind the cold facade wasn't as heartless as he wanted the world to believe. But she had no way to prove it now. A single tear slipped down her cheek, but she wiped it away just as quickly. If this was the end of her life as she knew it, then she would rebuild it. And she would do it without Ethan Knight. The city was a beast, relentless, uncaring, and indifferent to those it swallowed whole. Sophia Carter had been at the bottom before, but never like this. She stood outside a small cafe, staring at the now hiring sign taped to the window. Her fingers tightened into fists at her sides. She could walk in, beg for a job, start from nothing, again. But this time she wouldn't just survive, she would rebuild. She took a deep breath and stepped inside. Small cafe, interior. The scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the air. The place was nothing like the high-end restaurants Ethan Knight frequented, but it was warm, real. A middle-aged woman, the owner, looked up from behind the counter. "Help wanted?" Sophia asked, keeping her voice steady. The woman gave her a once-over, recognition flashing in her eyes. She knew. Everyone did. The woman who trapped Ethan Knight. Sophia braced herself for rejection, but instead, the woman nodded. "You ever worked a register?" Sophia exhaled. "Yeah." The woman gestured toward the counter. "You start tomorrow." It wasn't much. It wasn't glamorous. But it was hers. Sophia's new apartment, Knight. The tiny one-bedroom apartment was a far cry from her old place, but at least she had a roof over her head. She dropped her worn-out bag on the couch and sighed, exhaustion settling deep in her bones. She had lost everything, but she had survived. As she sat down, flipping open her notebook, an idea took shape. Her own business. A way to escape the cycle of depending on others. She didn't know where to start, but she would figure it out. Ethan Knight thought he had destroyed her, but she wasn't broken, not even close. The city had a way of swallowing people whole, but Sophia Carter refused to be one of them. Small cafe, early morning. The tiny cafe that once gave her a second chance had become something more. Sophia wiped her hands on her apron, stepping back to admire the corner shelf now filled with small, handcrafted journals and notebooks. Her notebooks. She had started small, pouring her heart into custom designs, using the skills she had abandoned long ago. What had begun as a quiet passion turned into something bigger. Customers noticed. They asked about them. They wanted more. She had spent nights researching, figuring out suppliers, designing her own website. It was slow, exhausting, and terrifying. But for the first time, it was hers. The first order had come in 2 months ago. Now, they were selling out every week, selling out every local business event, Sophia's small booth. Sophia stood behind her modest booth at a small entrepreneur expo, her hands smoothing over the neatly stacked journals embossed with her logo, Carter and Company. She had barely set up before people started approaching. "I saw your designs online," a woman gushed. "They're beautiful." "Do you take custom orders?" another asked, flipping through the pages. Sophia smiled, pride swelling in her chest. "I do." By noon, she had sold out. As she packed up, her phone buzzed with a new email, a proposal from a high-end boutique wanting to stock her products. Her hands trembled as she read it twice, then a third time. She didn't need a billionaire's name. She didn't need his money. She had built this from nothing. And she was just getting started. Knight Enterprises, Ethan's office. Ethan sat at his desk, scrolling through his tablet absent-mindedly. But then something made him stop. A headline. From Scandal to Success, How Sophia Carter Built an Empire Without Ethan Knight. His grip on the tablet tightened as he stared at her photo, standing at her business event, smiling, confident, completely unbothered. Something unfamiliar curled in his chest. She didn't just survive, she thrived. And for the first time since she walked out of his life, Ethan Knight didn't feel victorious. He felt something dangerously close to regret. The city moved at its usual relentless pace, but for Ethan Knight, time had slowed. Ethan's office night. The glow of the city lights spilled into his office, casting long shadows across the sleek furniture. Ethan sat at his desk, fingers drumming against the glass surface, his sharp eyes fixed on the tablet screen in front of him. Another article, another feature, another reminder of the woman he once underestimated. Carter & Co. How Sophia Carter built a luxury brand from scratch. There she was, in yet another high-profile interview, her confidence practically radiating off the screen. She wasn't just surviving. She wasn't just doing well. She was dominating. He should have been indifferent, but he wasn't. Lucas stepped into the office, clearing his throat. "You've been keeping an eye on her." Ethan didn't look up. "She's making waves. It's hard not to notice." Lucas smirked slightly, taking a seat across from him. "You mean it's hard for you not to notice?" Ethan's jaw tightened, his fingers swiping over the screen, scrolling through images of her at business expos, interviews, networking events. She looked different, not in a physical way, but in the way she carried herself. Stronger, untouchable. "She did all of this without you," Lucas added, studying his boss carefully. Ethan exhaled sharply, leaning back in his chair. "I never said she wouldn't." Lucas raised a brow. "But you didn't think she would." Ethan didn't reply, because the truth was, he hadn't. He had expected her to break, to disappear under the weight of the scandal. But she hadn't just survived, she had thrived. And every success she had, every headline, every new deal she signed, it was proof that she had never needed him. That thought should have made it easier to forget her. It didn't. Lucas stood, smoothing out his suit. "Are you ever going to admit you were wrong about her?" Ethan's expression remained unreadable, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Regret. "She doesn't need my approval." Lucas chuckled under his breath. "Number. But maybe you need hers." Ethan didn't respond as Lucas left the office, leaving him alone once more with his thoughts. His gaze flickered back to the screen, to her face. Radiant, successful, untouchable. He had burned every bridge between them. But for the first time in his life, Ethan Knight wondered if he had destroyed the only thing that ever truly mattered. The past had a way of creeping back when least expected. Private lounge, high-end restaurant. Ethan Knight sat in the dimly lit lounge, a glass of whiskey untouched on the table before him. Across from him, Lucas slid a folder onto the polished surface. "You need to see this." Ethan didn't move at first, his jaw tight. He had spent months convincing himself that he had been right about Sophia, that her betrayal had been nothing but a calculated move. So why did he hesitate now? "Just read it," Lucas insisted. Ethan finally reached for the folder, flipping it open. What he saw made his blood run cold. Photographs, surveillance shots, Victoria Laurent, Sophia Carter. A grainy image of them standing in the corner of the gala's ballroom, the night Sophia had made the announcement. The next page contained messages, threats, proof. Victoria had forced Sophia into it. Ethan's pulse roared in his ears. His grip tightened around the pages as he read through the damning evidence. Victoria had blackmailed Sophia, used her as a pawn to publicly humiliate him, to destroy him, and he had let it happen. "Why are you showing me this now?" Ethan's voice was dangerously quiet. Lucas leaned back, watching him carefully. Because you need to know the truth before it's too late. Ethan closed the folder, but the truth was already sinking in, suffocating him. He had spent so much time punishing Sophia, ensuring she lost everything, when all along, she had been the one who suffered the most. He had destroyed her for something she never did. And now, she was gone. For the first time in his life, Ethan Knight felt something dangerously close to regret. The past had never haunted Ethan Knight, until now. Ethan's penthouse night. The city stretched out beneath him, a glittering landscape of power and success. Yet for the first time, none of it mattered. Ethan sat in his penthouse, the dim glow of his whiskey glass catching the light as he swirled the amber liquid. The folder Lucas had given him lay open on the table beside him, the evidence glaring back at him like a silent accusation. Victoria had orchestrated everything, and he, Ethan Knight, the man who prided himself on being untouchable, unreadable, had let himself be played. He had turned against the only woman who had ever truly cared for him. His fingers tightened around the glass before he set it down with deliberate control. His mind replayed every moment, every cruel word he had thrown at Sophia. The way she had looked at him that night, her eyes pleading for him to believe her, and he hadn't. Instead, he had destroyed her. No job, no money, no future. He had made sure of it. Now, she had rebuilt herself, without him. He leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees, his head dropping for just a second. The weight of his mistake pressing down on him. The woman he had branded a liar had been the one telling the truth. The woman he had thought was using him had been the one fighting to protect someone she loved. And he, the man who never made mistakes, had made the worst one of all. Because now, she was gone. And for the first time in his life, Ethan Knight didn't know how to fix it. Ethan Knight had built empires, crushed rivals, and turned power into an art form. But tonight, none of it mattered. Sophia's boutique, night. Sophia locked the front door of Carter and Company, exhaling slowly as she turned the sign to closed. The small shop had become her sanctuary, the one place where she was in control of her own life. Then she heard it, the deep, familiar timbre of a voice she hadn't heard in months. Sophia. Her spine stiffened. She turned slowly, and there he was, Ethan Knight, standing under the streetlight, looking like he had walked out of a storm. His suit was perfect, his stance controlled, but his eyes were raw. Sophia crossed her arms, forcing her voice to remain steady. "You shouldn't be here." Ethan stepped forward. "I know." Silence stretched between them, thick with everything unsaid. Sophia's heart pounded, but she wouldn't let him see it. "What do you want, Ethan?" He exhaled, his jaw tightening. "To fix this." Sophia let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "Fix what, exactly? The fact that you ruined my life? That you made sure I lost everything? Or that you never believed me in the first place?" Ethan flinched, but he didn't back down. "I know the truth now. About Victoria. About everything." Sophia's breath caught, but she quickly masked it. "And what? You expect me to forgive you?" "No." His voice was hoarse. "Real. I don't deserve that." She stared at him, searching his face, but she didn't recognize the man in front of her. This wasn't the Ethan Knight she had met months ago, the ruthless billionaire who had destroyed her. This was a man who looked like he had finally realized what he had lost. Ethan took a step closer, hesitating before he spoke. "I was wrong about you, Sophia. About everything. And I don't know how to make it right." His voice dipped lower, almost vulnerable. "But I need you to know. I never stopped thinking about you. Sophia felt something crack inside her, but she couldn't afford to be weak. Not now. She took a slow breath and whispered, "It's too late, Ethan." His expression didn't change, but she saw the flicker of pain in his eyes. Still, he nodded. Because maybe for the first time in his life, Ethan Knight understood. Some things couldn't be undone. Sophia Carter stood frozen outside her boutique, Ethan's words still hanging in the cold night air. "I never stopped thinking about you." She wanted to believe him, wanted to let herself feel the weight of those words. But she had spent too long rebuilding herself from the ashes of his destruction. And now, he wanted a second chance. Sophia's apartment later that night. Sophia sat on her couch, staring at the untouched cup of tea in her hands. Jenna, her best friend and business partner, sat across from her, watching her closely. "You saw him," Jenna stated. It wasn't a question. Sophia exhaled, rubbing her temple. "Yeah." "And?" Sophia let out a humorless laugh. "And he said he was sorry, said he knew the truth now." Jenna frowned. "And do you believe him?" Sophia's fingers tightened around her cup. That was the question, wasn't it? Could she trust Ethan Knight again? She had loved him once. Or at least she had fallen for the man she thought he was. But love didn't erase the damage he had done. Love didn't undo the months she had spent scraping her life back together. Her business, her success. She had done it without him. "What if he really means it?" Jenna asked softly. Sophia looked away, her throat tightening. "And what if he doesn't?" Ethan sat at his desk, staring at his phone. He had never been the type to wait for an answer, never been the type to hope. But for the first time in his life, he wasn't in control. Then, his phone buzzed. A single message. "Meet me tomorrow. One last time." Ethan exhaled slowly, his grip tightening around the device. Tomorrow, he would know. Would she forgive him, or would she walk away forever? The grand ballroom of the city's most exclusive hotel buzzed with anticipation. It was a night of power, of prestige, and of justice. Ethan Knight stood at the center of it all, microphone in hand, his icy gaze scanning the crowd. Victoria Laurent and Damien Cole stood near the front, unaware of what was coming. Sophia Carter stood at the edge of the room, her heart pounding, watching as the man who once destroyed her prepared to burn his own world to the ground for her. Ethan cleared his throat, his voice calm but carrying a weight that silenced the murmuring guests. "I've spent my life building an empire, controlling every outcome, ensuring no one could ever betray me." He let his gaze flicker toward Victoria and Damien, his smirk sharp. "But it turns out, the greatest betrayal was the one I didn't see coming." A hush spread across the room. Ethan turned toward the massive LED screen behind him. With a simple gesture, the screen lit up, displaying damning evidence. Messages, recordings, and surveillance photos of Victoria blackmailing Sophia. Gasps erupted. Victoria's face paled. Damien cursed under his breath. Ethan's smirk didn't waver. "For months, I believed the wrong person. I punished the wrong woman." His gaze softened as it landed on Sophia. "But that ends tonight." He stepped forward, crossing the room until he stood directly in front of her. The entire ballroom watched in stunned silence as Ethan Knight, the ruthless billionaire who never apologized, never admitted weakness, went down on one knee. Sophia's breath caught. "Oh God, I was wrong about you," Ethan said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I thought I knew everything, controlled everything. But I didn't know what it meant to need someone until I lost you." A diamond ring glistened between his fingers. I don't want power without you. I don't want success without you. I don't want this life if you're not in it. He exhaled, his voice dropping lower. Marry me, Sophia. Tears burned behind her eyes. She had sworn she wouldn't forgive him, that she had moved on, rebuilt her life. But standing here, watching him strip himself bare in front of the world, she realized something terrifying. She still loved him. Sophia took a shaky breath, then slowly placed her hand in his. Yes, she whispered. The crowd erupted into cheers. Ethan slid the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms, his lips crashing against hers as the cameras flashed and the world watched. But in that moment, nothing else mattered. The city skyline glittered beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows of Ethan Knight's penthouse. But tonight, he wasn't alone. Sophia Carter stood beside him, dressed in an elegant black gown, a glass of champagne in her hand. She gazed out at the world below, the world that once tried to break her. But now, she owned it. Ethan stepped closer, his hand sliding around her waist, his voice low. They said we wouldn't survive this. Sophia smirked, turning to face him. They don't know who they were up against. He lifted her hand, pressing a kiss to her ring, the ring that symbolized everything they had fought for: love, power, redemption. The world had tried to tear them apart, but together, they were unstoppable. They were unstoppable.